Oh my God.
The old man named Samuel had nothing left to lose. His wife was gone. His son was gone. Even his hope was gone. All he had now was his old horse, his broken wagon, and a ranch that the desert was slowly eating away, piece by piece. Samuel had spent the whole day driving his empty wagon to the small town, 40 miles away. He went there to sell things, old tools, broken leather, anything that might bring a few dollars. But this time, he came back with less than he went with. Even the people in town didn't want what he had anymore. The world was moving on. The Wild West was changing, and Samuel was being left behind. The sun was starting to go down when Samuel left the town. The sky was still blue, but something felt wrong. Samuel had lived in the desert for 30 years. He knew the signs. The wind was too hot. The birds had stopped singing. The air felt thick and heavy, like it was holding its breath. Samuel's horse, an old brown animal named Dust, was nervous too. The horse kept moving its ears backward and forward. It pulled on the reins. Samuel could feel the fear coming from the animal's body. "I know, boy," Samuel whispered. "I feel it too." He looked behind him at the empty desert. The trail was long and empty. It stretched backward into nothing. There was no town behind him anymore. There were no people anywhere. Just desert, sky, and the small sound of the wagon wheels turning. Samuel checked the clouds again. They were darker now, much darker. In the distance, he could see something that made his blood cold. The sky was turning black, not like night black. This was different. This was the black of a dust storm, one of the terrible storms that could kill a man in minutes. Samuel pulled the reins harder. Dust moved faster, but it was too late. The wind came like a monster. It came so fast that Samuel barely had time to understand what was happening. One moment, the desert was quiet. The next moment, the world exploded into dust and wind and chaos. The storm hit like a wave of sand. The wind screamed. The dust was so thick that Samuel couldn't see his own hands in front of his face. It was like the whole world had turned to brown powder. Samuel wrapped cloth around his face. He could barely breathe. The dust came through the cloth anyway. It filled his mouth. It got into his eyes and made them burn like fire. The wagon shook in the wind. Samuel held the reins tight, but Dust was terrified. The horse was pulling and running, trying to escape from the storm. For what felt like forever, Samuel just held on. He held the reins. He held his breath. He held on to hope that the wagon wouldn't turn over, that the wind wouldn't kill them both. Then slowly, something changed. The wind became weaker. The dust wasn't as thick. Samuel could see a little bit, just a little. The storm was moving away from them. It was moving toward the east, leaving them behind. Samuel let out a long breath. He was alive. Dust was alive. The wagon was still moving. But the world around them had completely changed. Everything was covered in dust. The trail looked different. Samuel didn't even know if they were on the right path anymore. The landscape looked like a ghost world, gray and dead and empty. Samuel was so tired. His body hurt. He wanted to stop. He wanted to sleep, but something inside him said to keep moving. The storm was gone now, but the night was coming, and the night in the desert was dangerous. He moved Dust forward slowly. The horse was tired too. Samuel could feel it. But they kept going, moving through the dusty desert, like two ghosts looking for home. That's when Samuel saw it. At first, he thought it was a rock, just another rock in the desert. But as the wagon came closer, he understood. It wasn't a rock, it was a wooden crate. A big wooden crate, smashed and broken, lying on its side on the trail. Samuel pulled the reins. Dust stopped. The horse was breathing hard. Both of them were tired and scared and covered in dust. Samuel climbed down from the wagon. His legs were shaking. His body felt like it was made of old rope, ready to fall apart. He walked toward the crate slowly. The crate was completely destroyed. The wood was broken into pieces. Some of the wood was dark brown, some was light. Samuel could see that something had been inside it, something important. Because somebody had put this crate in a wagon, and they had been carrying it carefully. That much Samuel could see from the way the wood was built, strong and thick. But the storm had destroyed it. The wagon that was carrying it must have been blown over. Or maybe the horses had run away in fear. Samuel didn't know. He only knew that something had happened on this trail. Something had broken. Samuel moved the broken pieces of wood with his hands. The pieces were heavy. The dust was still in the air, making it hard to see. That's when he heard something. It was so small that Samuel almost missed it. It was so quiet that his old ears almost couldn't catch it. But it was there. A sound, a cry, not a human cry. Something else. Samuel's heart stopped. He moved more wood, moving faster now. His old hands were shaking. He pushed the wood to the side, and then he saw it. In the bottom of the broken crate, under pieces of wood and dust, was a tiny horse. A baby horse. A foal. The foal's eyes were barely open. Its body was so small, though, impossibly small, that Samuel thought it might be a dream. The tiny horse's skin was covered in dust and blood. There were cuts on its legs. One of its ears was bent in a strange way, and it was alive. The foal was looking up at Samuel with dark, wet eyes, and it cried again, that same small, broken sound. Samuel's hands moved without thinking. He cleaned the dust from the foal's face. He felt the small horse's heart beating. Fast, very fast. Too fast. "Where did you come from?" Samuel whispered. "Where is your mother?" But he already knew the answer. The desert had taken everything from this small horse. The storm had destroyed the crate. The journey had been too hard. The foal was alone. Completely alone. And it was dying.
Samuel wrapped the tiny foal in an old blanket from his wagon. The foal weighed almost nothing. It was like holding a broken bird, so light, so fragile, and so close to death that Samuel could feel it. The small horse's body was cold. The heart beating inside that small chest was too fast, like it was running from something. Samuel climbed back into the wagon, holding the foal carefully. He looked at Dust, his old horse, and the animal seemed to understand. Dust knew they were going home. The horse didn't argue. Even though Dust was tired and scared and covered in dust from the storm, the old horse turned around and started moving toward the ranch. The journey back to the ranch took 2 days instead of 1. Samuel couldn't push Dust hard. He had to move slowly and carefully. Every bump in the trail could hurt the foal. Every hard movement could be the last movement for the small horse. Samuel drove through the night. He couldn't sleep. He was afraid that if he closed his eyes, the foal would die. So he sat in the darkness, holding the tiny horse close to his body for warmth, and he drove forward into nothing. The foal never made a sound. It was so still that Samuel kept checking to make sure it was still breathing. He would put his hand on the small horse's body and feel the heartbeat. Yes, still alive, still fighting. By the time Samuel reached his ranch, the sun was starting to come up. The ranch looked exactly like it always looked, broken and forgotten. The fence was falling apart. The barn needed new wood. The house was small and empty. There were only a few animals left, an old cow, 3 chickens, and some goats that were as thin and tired as everything else on the ranch. Samuel carried the foal to the barn. He made a soft bed from hay and old blankets. The foal just lay there. Its eyes were still barely open. Samuel didn't know if the small horse even understood what was happening. That's when Samuel understood something terrible. He had no milk for the foal. He had almost nothing to eat himself. How could he save something when he was barely alive? But Samuel was a man who had learned to survive the impossible. He had lived through storms, floods, droughts, and loneliness. He had lost everything. So now, with nothing left to lose, he decided he would try. Samuel took cloth from an old shirt. He tore it into strips. Then he went to his old cow and took a small amount of milk. It wasn't much. The cow itself was so thin that she hardly made any milk anymore. But Samuel took what he could get. He mixed the milk with water to make it go further. Then he sat down next to the foal, took one strip of cloth, and dipped it in the milk mixture. He pressed the cloth against the foal's mouth. Nothing happened. The foal didn't try to drink. It just lay there, barely breathing. Samuel tried again, and again. His old hands were shaking. His throat was tight. He was trying to save something, but the desert had other ideas. The desert wanted to take this small horse. The desert always took everything. But on the fourth try, the foal's mouth moved. Tiny lips wrapped around the cloth. The small horse was trying. Just try a little bit, but it was something. That's right, Samuel whispered. Fight. You have to fight. The first day passed. The foal didn't die. Samuel didn't sleep. He sat next to the small horse in the darkness of the barn, feeding it strip by strip of milk-soaked cloth. It was slow work. The foal only drank a tiny amount, but every drop was keeping the small horse alive. Samuel started talking to the foal. He didn't know why. Maybe because he hadn't talked to anyone in 6 months. Maybe because the silence was too heavy. Maybe because he wanted the foal to know it wasn't alone. I found you, Samuel said quietly. I found you, and I'm not going to let you go. He told the foal about his wife, about the drought that had killed her. He told the foal about his son, who had left the ranch to find work in the cities. He told the foal about all the things he had lost. And then he told the foal something new. I'm going to call you Hope, Samuel said. Not because I'm hopeful. I'm not. I don't know how to be hopeful anymore. But because you're holding on. Even though you should be dead, you're holding on. That's what hope is. That's what it means. The second day came. The foal was still alive, but it still looked like it was dying. Its ribs showed through its thin skin like the bones of an old desert animal. Its legs were so weak that it couldn't stand. Its eyes were barely open. Samuel wasn't sure if Hope could even see him, but something was different. The foal's heartbeat was slower now. Not as wild, not as scared. Samuel didn't know if that was good or bad. He kept feeding the foal, strip by strip by strip, milk and water, mixed together, going into the small horse's mouth. Samuel's arms got tired. His back hurt from sitting on the ground. His eyes felt heavy from no sleep. But he kept doing it. Days passed. Samuel stopped counting them. Hope got stronger, very slowly, impossibly slowly. But day by day, the foal ate a little more. The heartbeat became calmer. The eyes opened a tiny bit more. Samuel would leave Hope only to go get more milk from the cow, or to feed the other animals, or to drink water himself. But most of the time, he sat in the barn in the darkness with the tiny foal. One morning, on the 7th day, something happened that Samuel didn't expect. Hope tried to stand. The foal's legs were shaking. They could barely hold the small horse's weight. But Hope was trying. The small horse was fighting to get up, fighting to live, fighting to become something more than a baby that was waiting to die. Samuel's eyes filled with tears. He couldn't remember the last time he had cried. His body didn't even know how to do it anymore. But tears came, real tears, hot tears that ran down his dusty face. Hope fell back down to the hay. But the foal had tried. That was everything. You're going to make it, Samuel whispered. He put his old, weathered hand on the foal's small body. You're going to make it, Hope. I promise you. You're going to live. And in that empty barn, in that forgotten ranch, in the middle of the desert, an old man and a tiny horse made a promise to each other. Neither one of them would let go. 2 weeks had passed since Samuel found Hope in the broken crate. The foal was different now. The eyes were open and bright. The body was still thin, but there was life in it. Real life. Not just the fighting to stay alive kind of life, but actual strength coming back day by day. Hope could stand now. The foal's legs were still weak and shaky, but the small horse could stand for a few minutes without falling. Samuel would watch as Hope stretched its tiny legs, learning how to be a horse, learning how to be alive. Every morning, Samuel fed the foal with the milk strips. Every evening, he did it again. The milk from the old cow was still not much, but it was enough. Hope was growing, slowly but growing. Samuel had stopped feeling tired. He had stopped feeling sad. He had stopped feeling like the world was empty and wrong. For the first time in years, Samuel felt like he had a reason to wake up in the morning. He had a reason to keep living. The other animals on the ranch seemed to feel it too. Even the old cow gave more milk. Even the chickens laid more eggs. It was like the whole ranch understood that something important was happening here. Something that mattered. But Samuel couldn't stop thinking about something. He kept remembering that wooden crate, the broken pieces of wood, and he kept remembering something he had seen but hadn't really understood at the time. A mark on the wood, some kind of writing, letters carved into the side of the crate. Samuel tried to remember what it said. He knew it was important. He knew it meant something. But the memory was fuzzy, covered by dust and fear and exhaustion. One afternoon, when Hope was sleeping in the hay, Samuel decided to do something he had been thinking about for days. He decided to go back to where he had found the foal. He needed to see that crate again. He needed to understand what it meant. Samuel left Hope in the barn with plenty of hay. The foal was strong enough now to be alone for a few hours. Samuel climbed onto Dust, and they rode back toward the desert trail where everything had started. The ride took most of the day. Samuel followed the path he had taken with the wagon. The desert looked the same as always, empty and brown and endless. But Samuel's heart was beating faster as he got closer to the spot where he had found Hope. Finally, he saw it. The broken crate. The pieces were still scattered on the trail. The storm had been 2 weeks ago, but nothing had touched the crate since then. There was nothing out here to move it. No people, no animals, just the empty desert. Samuel climbed down from Dust. His old knees hurt as he touched the ground. He walked to the crate slowly, looking at the pieces. Most of the wood was badly broken. The storm had destroyed most of it. But there was one piece, a longer piece of wood from the side of the crate, that was less damaged. Samuel picked it up carefully, and there it was. Words carved into the wood, burned into the wood with hot metal, the way people marked things that were important, the way people marked things that belonged to someone. Samuel's hands began to shake as he read it. The letters were clear and deep. Someone had put time and effort into carving these words. Morgan's prize mare. Samuel sat down hard on the desert ground. His breath came short and fast. Morgan. That name meant something. That name meant danger. Samuel had heard the name Morgan before. 3 months ago, when he went to town, people were talking about it. A man named Morgan. A cruel man. A man who took things that didn't belong to him. A man who had men working for him. Men who would hurt people. Men who would kill for money. Morgan had been stealing horses from people all across the territory. Poor farmers. Small ranches, rich families. It didn't matter to Morgan. If the horse was good, Morgan took it. He would break the horses. He would sell them. He would do terrible things to them. People had tried to stop him, but Morgan had too many men working for him. Morgan had too much money. The law was far away, and Morgan had already bought some of the lawmen. And Hope, tiny, small, beautiful Hope, had belonged to Morgan. No, that wasn't right. Hope hadn't belonged to Morgan. Hope had belonged to Morgan's mare. A horse that Morgan had stolen. A horse that had been pregnant. A horse that had escaped from Morgan. Samuel understood now. Hope's mother had run away. The mare had gotten free from Morgan. She had been running, trying to escape, carrying her baby inside her body. The baby was born in that crate during the journey. And then, something had happened. Maybe the mother died. Maybe she had to leave the foal behind to save herself. Maybe the crate had broken, and the mother ran away, trying to survive. Samuel didn't know. He might never know, but he knew one thing. Hope was living proof of Morgan's crimes. Hope's mother was stolen property. Hope was the child of stolen property. And Morgan would want Hope back. Not because Morgan cared about the foal, because Hope was proof. Proof that Morgan's mare had been here. Proof that Morgan was a thief. If Morgan knew about Hope, Morgan would come for the foal, and Morgan would kill anyone who was protecting it. Samuel held the piece of wood in his hands. The words Morgan's prize mare seemed to burn his eyes. He had been so happy. For the first time in years, he had felt like he had a reason to live. He had hope. Hope gave him hope. But now that happiness was turning into fear, Samuel looked toward the west, toward his ranch, toward the barn where Hope was sleeping peacefully in the hay, toward the small horse that didn't know that the world wanted to kill it, that didn't know that Samuel had brought a death sentence home. What was Samuel supposed to do? Send Hope away? Let the foal die? Kill Hope himself to protect the small horse from Morgan? Or hide Hope and hope that Morgan never found out? Samuel put the piece of wood down. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He sat on the desert ground as the sun started to go down. And for the first time since he had found Hope, Samuel felt truly afraid. Not afraid of dying. He was old. He was ready to die. He was afraid of losing Hope. He was afraid of what he might have to do to protect the small horse. Because Samuel understood one thing clearly now. He loved Hope, and he would do anything to keep that foal alive. Even if it meant going to war with a man like Morgan. Even if it meant destroying himself. Samuel didn't sleep that night. He rode back to the ranch as the sun fell into the desert. The sky turned orange and red, like the world was on fire. But Samuel didn't notice the beauty. He was thinking about one thing and one thing only. Morgan knew about the escaped mare. Morgan's men would be looking for the foal. Maybe they were already looking. Maybe they were close. When Samuel reached the ranch, he went straight to the barn. Hope was awake, waiting for him. The foal had grown so much in 2 weeks. The small horse was almost strong enough to walk around the barn. Almost strong enough to survive. But not strong enough to survive Morgan. Samuel held Hope close that night. He didn't feed the foal with the milk strips. He just held the small horse and listened to the darkness. He listened to every sound. Every noise could be Morgan's men coming. Every wind could be danger. 3 days passed. Samuel didn't leave the ranch. He didn't go to town. He didn't do anything except feed Hope and watch the trail. He was waiting for the men to come, waiting to lose everything again. On the 4th morning, Samuel saw the dust on the horizon. 2 horses, 2 men, coming from the east, moving fast along the trail toward the ranch. Samuel's heart stopped. He knew who they were. He didn't know their names, but he knew what they were. They were Morgan's men. They were the kind of men who did Morgan's work. Hard men, dangerous men, men who wouldn't think twice about hurting an old farmer and taking what he had. Samuel watched them come closer. He was standing outside the barn, his old body blocking the door. He had no weapon. He had no power. But he was not going to let them take Hope without a fight. The 2 men rode up to the barn and stopped. They were young, maybe 30 years old, maybe younger. One man had a scar across his face. The other man had cold, hard eyes that looked like stones. "You," the scar man said. His voice was rough, like rocks grinding together. "You have something we're looking for." Samuel said nothing. He stood in front of the barn door. His old hands were at his sides. The cold-eyed man pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. A crate. Wooden crate. Belonged to Morgan. Storm happened 2 weeks ago. Crate might have come this way. We're looking for it. And anything that might have been inside it. Samuel's mouth was dry. He wanted to speak, but nothing came out. "You see anything?" the scar man asked. "You see a crate on the trail? You see anything strange?" Samuel looked at the 2 men. He looked at their hard faces. He looked at their hands, which were near their guns. He understood that these men would kill him if he said the wrong thing. He understood that he was about to lose everything again. But then Samuel thought about Hope, and he made a decision. "No," Samuel said. His voice was quiet, but it was steady. "I didn't see anything." The 2 men looked at each other. The cold-eyed man's hand moved toward his gun. "You sure about that, old man? Because if you're lying to us—" "I'm not lying," Samuel said. "I didn't see a crate. I didn't see anything." The scar man rode closer. He was looking at Samuel's face, trying to read it, trying to understand if the old man was telling the truth. "We're going to look around," the scarred man said. "We're going to search this ranch. If we find anything—" "You won't find anything," Samuel said. "But you can search if you want." The 2 men got off their horses. They started walking around the ranch. They looked in the house. They looked in the shed. They were moving toward the barn when Samuel made a choice that changed everything. He stepped away from the barn door. The 2 men looked at each other. Then they walked inside the barn. Samuel followed them. His heart was breaking. He was about to lose Hope. After 2 weeks of fighting, after keeping the foal alive, after falling in love with the small horse, it was going to end here in the darkness of the barn. The cold-eyed man was looking around. He was looking at the hay. He was looking at the blankets. He was looking for something small, something that might be a foal. And then he saw it. Hope was standing in the corner of the barn. The foal had heard the men come. The small horse was standing, watching them carefully. The foal's legs were still thin and weak, but hope was standing. Strong, brave. The two men stopped moving. For a long moment, nobody did anything. Nobody said anything. The barn was completely silent except for the sound of breathing. Then the scarred man took a step toward Hope. Samuel's old body moved faster than it had moved in years. He stepped forward, putting himself between Hope and the men. "Don't touch the foal," Samuel said. The scarred man stopped. He looked at Samuel, and he looked back at Hope. The foal walked forward. Hope was moving toward the scarred man, not away. The small horse wasn't afraid. The foal was showing courage that Samuel had never seen before. Not running, not hiding, just walking toward the danger with strength in those thin, young legs. The cold-eyed man put his hand on the scarred man's shoulder. "Look at that," he said quietly. The scarred man was looking at Hope's eyes. Those dark, brave eyes. Those eyes that had survived a desert storm. Those eyes that had learned to live when the world wanted it dead. And something changed in the scarred man's face. Samuel could see it. Could see the hardness starting to crack. Could see something human appearing in those hard features. The foal reached the scarred man and touched the man's hand with its small nose. The scarred man didn't move. He just stood there, feeling the foal's touch. Feeling the warmth of a life that should have been dead. Feeling the courage of something impossibly small and impossibly strong. "It's Morgan's," the cold-eyed man said. "It's his mare's foal." "I know," the scarred man said. His voice was different now. Softer, quieter. For a long time, nobody spoke. The scarred man was still touching Hope's head. The foal was still standing there, unafraid. Then the scarred man pulled his hand away. "Let's go," he said to the cold-eyed man. "But Morgan," the cold-eyed man started. "Let's go," the scarred man said again. His voice was hard now, but it was a different kind of hard. A hard that meant decision. A hard that meant strength. The two men walked out of the barn. Samuel followed them. He watched as they got on their horses. The scarred man looked back at Samuel one more time. The old farmer couldn't read his face, but the man nodded slowly. Just one nod. Then they turned their horses around and rode away. Back toward the east. Back toward Morgan's land. Samuel stood in the dust of a trail and watched them go. He didn't move until they were completely gone, until there was nothing but empty desert behind them. Then Samuel walked back to the barn. Hope was still standing in the same place. The foal wasn't afraid. The foal had faced danger and hadn't run. The small horse had shown courage when courage was the only thing that mattered. Samuel wrapped his arms around Hope and held the foal close. And he understood something true. Loyalty worked both ways. Love worked both ways. And sometimes the smallest act of courage could change the hardest hearts. 5 years passed. Hope was no longer a tiny foal that could fit in Samuel's hands. The young horse had grown into something beautiful and strong. Hope's dark coat shined like polished leather. The horse's legs were long and powerful. But the eyes, those dark, brave eyes, they were still the same. Still unafraid. Still remembering. Samuel had grown older in those 5 years. His hair had turned completely white. His face had more wrinkles. But something else had changed too. Samuel looked alive now. He looked like a man who had a reason to wake up every morning. The ranch had changed as well. Samuel had used money from selling eggs and milk to fix the fence. The barn had new wood. The house had new windows. There was green grass now instead of just brown desert. It wasn't a rich ranch. It would never be a rich ranch. But it was beautiful in its own way. It was a place where life could grow. It was a place where broken things could heal. Hope had become the heart of the ranch. The horse wasn't like other horses. Everyone in the small town nearby knew it. Travelers would come past the ranch just to see Hope, just to look at the beautiful dark horse that had survived the impossible. Samuel never told the story. He never explained where Hope came from. He never talked about the broken crate or the desert storm or Morgan's men. He just let people see the horse and understand what they wanted to understand. But somehow, the story spread anyway. Old cowboys sitting around fires in the town would tell it. Mothers would tell it to their children. The story grew and changed as it moved from person to person, like a wind moving across the desert. They said a tiny foal had been abandoned in the desert. They said an old man had found it and brought it home. They said the old man had saved the foal's life when he had almost nothing himself. They said the foal had grown into the most beautiful horse anyone had ever seen. They said that the horse and the man had a bond that was stronger than anything in the world. The story became a legend. People would come from far away just to see Samuel and Hope together. And when they saw them, they understood. They understood something true about the world. They understood that love was real, that loyalty was real, that even in the hardest, cruelest world, beautiful things could grow. One boy came to the ranch, a boy who was orphaned, like Samuel had been. Samuel taught the boy how to care for Hope. The boy learned how to brush the horse's coat, how to feed it, how to understand what the horse was feeling just by looking in its eyes. "Why does the horse trust you so much?" the boy asked one day. Samuel was sitting by the fence, watching Hope run across the pasture. The horse was running fast, free and wild and beautiful. "Because I saved its life," Samuel said. "But lots of people save things," the boy said. "Why is Hope different?" Samuel thought about this for a long time. He thought about the desert storm. He thought about finding Hope in the broken crate. He thought about the 2 weeks of feeding the foal with milk strips. He thought about facing Morgan's men and being willing to lose everything. "Hope trusts me because I showed up," Samuel said finally. "Not just one time. Every single day. When the foal could have died, I was there. When Morgan's men came, I didn't run. I stayed. That's what loyalty means. It means showing up, even when it's hard, even when you're scared." The boy nodded. He didn't completely understand, but he would. Later, when he was older, he would understand. Years continued to pass. Samuel grew older and slower. His body began to wear out in the way that old bodies do. But his spirit didn't wear out. Every morning, Samuel would go to see Hope. He would touch the horse's neck. He would look in those dark eyes and remember. Remember the desert storm. Remember the broken crate. Remember the tiny foal that refused to die. Hope seemed to understand that Samuel was getting weaker. The horse would stand very still when Samuel touched it. The horse would make soft sounds, like it was trying to tell Samuel something, like it was trying to say thank you. One cold morning in winter, Samuel woke up and knew that his time was coming to an end. He could feel it in his body. He could feel death getting ready to take him, and he wasn't afraid. He went to the barn and stood next to Hope one last time. "You're going to be okay," Samuel whispered. "You're strong now. You don't need me anymore." But Hope knew. The horse put its head against Samuel's chest. The horse could feel the old man's heart beating. The horse knew what was happening. Samuel held Hope like that for a long time. And in the silence of the barn, in the early morning light, 2 souls said goodbye to each other. That afternoon, Samuel died in his sleep. The people from the town came to the ranch. They came to bury Samuel and say goodbye to the old man who had changed their lives without knowing it. They buried him under a big tree near the barn. They put a simple stone on his grave with his name, Samuel. But the thing nobody forgot was what happened at the grave. Hope came to the grave and stood there. All night long, the horse stood next to Samuel's grave. In the morning, Hope was still there. In the afternoon, still there. The horse didn't eat. The horse didn't leave. The horse just stood in silence, keeping watch. Day after day, Hope returned to that same spot. The horse would stand there for hours, looking at the grave, remembering. The townspeople came to see it. They brought their children. They brought strangers. They brought people who needed to see something true about the world. And everyone who saw Hope standing at Samuel's grave understood something important. They understood that love didn't die. Loyalty didn't die. The bond between 2 beings, between a man and a horse, between a human and an animal, that bond was stronger than death itself. Months passed, then years. Hope lived for many more years after Samuel died. The horse became part of the legend. Children grew up hearing the story. Old people who had seen Hope and Samuel together would tell the story to their grandchildren. The story grew bigger and bigger until it wasn't just a story about one old man and one horse. It became a story about something that mattered to everyone. It became a story about what it meant to save a life. What it meant to show up. What it meant to love something so much that you would sacrifice everything. When Hope finally died, many years later, the town held a ceremony. They buried Hope next to Samuel. They put flowers on both graves. and they promised that the story would never be forgotten. And it wasn't forgotten. For generations, people told the story of the tiny foal that almost died on the trail, the story of an old man who had nothing but saved everything, the story of a love so strong that it changed the world forever. The old cowboys would sit around the fire and tell it. The mothers would tell it to their children. The children would grow up and tell it to their own children. And everyone who heard the story understood the same thing that Samuel had understood on the day he found hope in the broken crate. Loyalty never dies. Silence is strength. True bonds outlive death. Even the weakest moment can become legendary.